name is Beck and welcome to a author spotlight for Sebastian de Castell. This is a spoiler-free video and I'm going to be talking about his current works and whether I think you would like them based on the synopsis and what his writing style is and what I think of the books. So I'm going to talk about his few series in this video. He hasn't published a ton of works, not like massive authors like Robin Hobb or Brandon Sanderson for example, but he's an author that I really want a lot more people to get behind because I think he writes characters and magic intricately well, and obviously he's one of my favorites and that's why I want to talk about him. So I should talk about Spellslinger first. It is his young adult series and it's a complete series now. Spellslinger follows Kellen, and Kellen is a teenager who is growing up in his town of the Jartep and he's just trying to become a mage, which is what him and his sister and what their culture really push to become. But unfortunately he's not quite got the capacity to do so like everybody else. So for some reason his magic is stunted and he's got to bluff his way through different scenarios in order to survive, because the way that the world is built up in here is a lot of people manipulate others quite nastily in order to gain power, and I guess that's a reflection on what society could be at the moment in the real world, but it's very much mirrored here in a fantasy world that is a quest to become the most magical and powerful you can become, whether that's magical power, political power, etc. I think this is told in a brilliant way because it handles a lot of different themes, and I like the way that the underdogs come through in here. I love the way that there's found family in here too, and I like the way that Kellen is given the support that he needs but also given the space that he needs to grow as he needs, and it's one of the things that made me super emotional about this series. The back of this book really sums up this general premise well in just one dot point, and it says it's a dramatic tale of betrayal, romance and the discovery of one's true nature. And truly in this, people's natures and personalities and goals are really brought down to the base level, and I love the way that the characters mesh in here and the tension is built in here, and you just see characters get used and abused, and there is darkness in here as well, especially with familial, mental and emotional abuse as well as physical, and there is also an animal abuse situation in the beginning, but all of that does happen, but I don't think these books should be written off because of that, because the characters in here are held accountable for what they do, and it's noted what they do and that those things are not the right thing to do. So I love the way that this series hits on those tension points, and I think the way that the banter is portrayed in here and the lightheartedness in here really lifts a lot of those dark moments up as well. So it's got a brilliant balance of both, and I think that the Spellslinger series is a young adult fantasy series that more people really should pick up and give a try because the tone of it is brilliant. And there were many dark things that happened in this book in this series, but ultimately I also laughed a lot out loud while reading a lot of this series as well. So that is to be said about it. It has a lot of light and dark moments and the characters just win your heart, so I would encourage you to read this. Then we've got another series that is called The Way of the Argosy, and this follows a character that was in the Spellslinger books. So you can read these before or after Spellslinger or the series in general. It's completely up to you. They're marketed as a prequel series, so you can read them first and then read Spellslinger. I've only read the first one. I haven't read Fall of the Argosy yet, so I don't believe there are any spoilers in it as far as I'm aware. If they are, they're very tangential spoilers and I've not noticed them, so they won't break the Spellslinger series for you. You can read them in publication order or in general specified order. It's really up to you. So I love the way that Sebastian de Castell's writing shone through in this work as well, because I was really worried. I was like, this is going to be Faru's story, and Faru is a character that I really respected as this kind of off-the-handle mentor kind of character in the first series, because her role as mentor and support for Kellen was one of the things that just really touched my heart, and I loved her dynamic and how sometimes she would take things seriously and sometimes she would be flippant and sometimes she would offer advice, and not always would it make sense, but there would always be that emotional sucker punch, and she's very clearly had a massive journey to bring her to this character point. And so now Sebastian de Castell's like, I'm going to show you the journey, and he shows all of the lead up to where Faru is now. So we see a lot of her childhood that's only alluded to in the Spellslinger books, and I love the way that her resilience really coalesces, at least closer to the end of the first book. I found the beginning of the first book in the Argosy series hard when it came to pace. So if you're someone who needs to be brought into a story immediately, I would stick with Spellslinger first because that picks up straight away, and then when you're invested in Faru as a character, go back and read her Argosy books, or you can start the other way around. It's entirely up to you. But I loved the Argosy book. I didn't think I would. I was worried when I was reading it, but it was brilliant. And I think her voice was actually quite varied in terms of Kellen, even though it was the same writer. And I really respect that when it comes to a character writer, because he can convey different voices based on the different scenarios and livelihoods of the characters that he's showing you and telling you about. And then lastly, I want to talk about his adult series, and that is the Traitor's Blade series, or Traitor's Blade, the Greatcoats series. And this is a quartet, so it's a completed series already, and there is an additional kind of spin-off series coming out in 2022. The first book is Play of Shadows, and I know that follows children of the Greatcoats. So if you don't want spoilers for the Greatcoats quartet, probably don't read Play of Shadows. I can confidently say that now because I know there will be spoilers for the Greatcoats series in that spin-off series. So, The Greatcoats. I've got a separate review for Traitor's Blade, and I loved this book. When I first read it, I was obsessed with it and I gave it 5 stars. Upon reread, I gave it a 4.5 stars, but I'm still obsessed with it. So we follow Falkio, and he's our protagonist. We only hear from his perspective, and I like that across all of his books, Sebastian de Castell writes from just one character's voice predominantly, so when you are connecting to it, you can easily connect to one character because it's all conveyed through them. So that's one of the strong points I think of his work. It's also one of the points where his characters tend to be flawed and you don't realize it initially, and through their interactions and their behavior patterns you can actually start to pick things out that they need to improve on, and I like when you can pick those things out and you can see where they need to grow, because it makes a character more interesting to me because they're not perfect. So Falkio in Traitor's Blade, the first book, the way that it opens is Falkio and his crew, Brast and Kesty, his 2 best mates, they both were Greatcoats together during the king's life, but the king was murdered in a coup by the dukes. So because the dukes wanted to seize political power, they all conspired to kill the monarch, and so they killed the monarch. Now it's several years later, and Falkio and his mates and all the other Greatcoats have been spread out completely. They've gone particularly awry, and they're just trying to make a living based on the reputation still of the Greatcoats that a lot of people trail through the mud. So they're not really having a great time. So they're trying to act as sellswords right now, and they're on a current job and they're trying to protect this guy, but the guy that they're protecting gets murdered and then they get framed for it, and so there's a whole blowout after that happens. And I love the way that in the beginning of this book the character is very significant and very quick with their tone, and so Sebastian de Castell is making you laugh within 7 pages because of the way that the tone is conveyed, and if you're going to hook me, humour is one of the key ways to do that. And they're very sarcastic and they've got brilliant banter with all of the characters in the Greatcoats series, and it's likened very often to the Three Musketeers because the vibe and the tone is very similar. So if you want to pick up an adult fantasy that is not, again, too difficult and too long, I would highly recommend Sebastian de Castell. He's very fun to read from. His character voices he tends to nail, and he's only got perspectives from one character, so they're also easier to understand than a massive large-scale multiple perspective fantasy. So if you have picked up Sebastian de Castell, or you're going to in the future, do let me know down below. But thank you so much for watching this video. Come chat to me down in the comments, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.